Okay, this is a video tutorial of practice FRQ number 2 from Unit 6. The balance of payments in foreign exchange market are part of this question. So again, similar to the question we did before, this is one of those longer FRQs. It's going to be worth 10 points. This is supposed to take us about half of our time in the AP exam. Let's jump right in. We're looking at our favorite buddy here in part A, aggregate demand, aggregate supply. So we've got the US at full employment, and then we have to graph that. Then we're taking a look ahead just real quick here at part B. Assume that personal savings in the United States increase. Using correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market, show the impact of the increase on personal savings on the real interest rate. So let's just dive in and do those two graphs right here. So for part A, I'm hoping that you're feeling pretty confident about drawing a graph showing the economy at full employment. That should really feel pretty comfortable. And remember, you get 2 points for every graph that you do correctly, 1 point for just doing the graph that they ask us for, and then 1 point for putting the long run, in this case, in the right spot. So that's 2 points you're wrapping up out of the 10 right there, 20% of it. Fantastic. Here we go. Part B, personal savings. So I want you to think about when you see the words personal and savings. So you got to think about in the loanable funds, who are the suppliers and who are the demanders, and where is this going to be reflected? So the first thing I'm going to do while we're talking about that is just draw my graph, so that way we can talk about the solution. So look at your graph and make sure that you have real interest rates on the y-axis, because if you have nominal interest rates, you are not going to receive a point, and that is so tragic. Okay, so now we've got loanable funds. You get 1 point for doing this. So personal savings, we're talking about households. So remember when we learned about the loanable funds, we said who were the suppliers? So real quick review of that. Households are suppliers of loanable funds. Businesses are foreign investors, and then the government, right? And when we're talking about the government, we're not talking about Treasury. We're not talking about Congress. We're talking about the central bank of the country, either increasing or decreasing the money supply. The demanders, also households, also businesses. But then we're talking, when we're saying the government, we're talking about the actual Congress passing a bill that needs to fund something or change the taxing law. So personal savings are going to, this is the money people are putting in banks. That's what this means by savings. This is not the money that they're not spending. This is not $20 that's sitting in their wallet that they said, oh, you know what, I'm going to take $20 a week and I'm going to put it in a shoebox under my bed. And then at the end of the month, I have 80 bucks. Personal savings specifically has the connotation of this is a banking account. Okay, so this is money that they're putting away in the bank. And that's kind of a vocabulary assessment here. They're trying to say, like, does this kid know that this is money that we're putting in a bank? So are you feeling like you understand if this is supply or demand? We're going to put this on the supply side. So we are going to shift the supply of loanable funds to the right. We are going to note that, and I'm going to tell you a common reason why kids get this part wrong. Okay. So in my experience, kids see savings increasing, and there are a portion of students who will say, oh, well, that means that they don't need loans. Nope, that does not mean that at all. I could put an extra, let's say every paycheck, I said to my employer or the bank, whomever is in charge of this, because I've had this done both ways, I could set up an automatic transfer at my bank. So every 2 weeks when I get paid, $250 goes into my savings account, right? Now, there's only 52 weeks in a year. So you do the math, okay? At the end of the year, 250 times every single week, there you go. That's my savings. However, I still might need to go buy a new car. And maybe that car costs $50,000. And I'm going to put $10,000 into it, but then I have to borrow the next 40. So do you see how, yeah, sure, I can save more every week, every month. And typically that's going to be done in small chunks. Very rarely is a regular person in the United States, middle class person, saying, oh, I'm just going to dump 50 grand into my savings every week. Like, that's just not feasible for most incomes. So Don't be under the misconception that if all of a sudden savings increase, then that means that the demand for loans will go down. So typically, when we see anything regarding households and their savings, we're going to be noting that in the supply of loanable funds. So just keep that in your head for the future. Okay, so for part C, they want us to build upon what we just did here. I'm just going to clean this up so it's not so messy. Based on the change of the real interest rate in Part B, will interest-sensitive expenditures increase, decrease, or remain unchanged? Well, interest rate went down, and so that means that they're going to increase. I don't think we need to explain why, because it just says, will they? What will happen to the rate of economic growth? Okay, so this is where we have to explain. If there is a lower real interest rate, you can make the assumption that our beautiful little businesses over here are going to see that and say, oh my goodness, it's time to invest in the business expansion that I've been waiting for. So that's the thing that leads to long run economic growth, right? Technology, capital goods, the things that make us do our business with more productivity. So we are asked to comment on what's going to happen to the economic growth rate, the rate at which the economy is growing. So we're going to say that the long run economic growth rate, now remember, it's a speed. So we're going to say it's going to increase or it will accelerate, whatever you want to do that, because lower real interest rates will result in investment in capital goods and new technology. Oh, it's beautiful. It's the whole reason why there is macroeconomics, is to get to this point in the world. All right. So now what we have to do is we have to show how that connects to exchange rates. So remember your shifters of the foreign exchange market. Interest rates are one of the shifters. It doesn't matter whose country has the higher interest rate. If somebody simply just wants to put their money in a bank and turn it into more money, then a higher interest rate is where the money will follow. It's like a magnet. So it says, assume that the real interest rate in the Eurozone increases relative to the real interest rate of the United States. So the Euro has the higher interest rate than the United States. So where are people going to put their money? Exactly. They're going to put it in European currency. Again, they're just putting their money into European banks. And in order to put their money into European banks, they need euros. So, I'll tell the story as we're going. So let's say you're an investor and you're Japanese and you're going to put your money into a bank account and you see, is this a graph for the euro? Yes. So you see that the interest rates in the United States just fell, right? And your money was in the US. Now you look at the euro and you say, oh my goodness, that is a higher interest rate. I definitely need to put my money there. So you're going to take your money out of the American account and you're going to put it into a European account. Now, here's the kicker. You might say to yourself, well, why do I demand euros? You don't, as the Japanese investor. You're just going to put your money in the bank. But the European bank doesn't want all that yen sitting around, because what is a French person going to do with your yen living in Paris? They're going to convert that into euros. So that's why they're going to be demanding euros, right? So that is the story that can help you understand why the demand for the euro would increase. And then we started with our basic foreign exchange graph. That's going to get us 1 point. And then we're going to shift that demand to the right. That's going to get us another point. That is part 1. And you'll notice part 2 is kind of weirdly written. It says value of the euro relative to the United States dollar. That's what you're showing on the graph. That's what this is. So part 2 is the actual graph, and part 1 is the demand for the euro will increase because foreign investors will want to put their money into European banks. So capitalize European banks that carry a higher real interest rate. Simple. Sorry that penmanship might be not that great, but I've talked about it and now I'm just putting something in writing to help you that need to see it. Okay, and then the last part of this question is E. Oh my goodness, my favorite part. What's my favorite part? D or E? I'm not sure. They're both international trade, so I'm into it. It says, assume the United States current account balance is zero. Based on the change in the value of the euro identified in part 2 of D, will the U.S. current account balance now be in a surplus, a deficit, or remain at zero? Okay, so let me tell you the answer first and then I'll explain. So first of all, you only have 3 options. You have a 33% chance. So if you're not sure at all, let's do our best. Okay, remember the Japanese investor? The Japanese investor says, I don't want my money in that American bank anymore. I'm taking it out and I'm going to go put it in a European bank. So what was that? That was the financial account and balance of payments, right? That was your investment, your net foreign investment into banking institutions. And now that Japanese investor says, I'm taking my money out. It's leaving the US. It's now in a deficit in the financial account side. So what does that mean? That means, remember, the current and financial are opposites. So if the financial account is now in a deficit, then that means, bingo, 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 the current account is now going to be in a surplus. Now, what's the other reason? Okay, so if I go to the graph, the demand for the euro went up. So that means that the demand for the US dollar is going to go down, and it means that the US dollar is going to be depreciating. And what does that mean? Well, that means American goods are going to be cheaper. And if they're cheaper, law of demand, people are going to buy more of those goods. So that means that if the US dollar depreciates, we're going to sell more goods. And that's in our current account. So the depreciation of our currency isn't all bad news, because that's going to drive up demand for American exports. They're going to feel cheaper, and this is going to put our current account into a surplus. Again, if you want to see the College Board's rubric, go ahead and click on the solutions, but that was my overview of this question.